Woke white woman forces her children to worship black women. She is also confused when black women call her out. Too bad Child Protective Services is too busy going after kids with airsoft guns to pay any attention. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with a piece of work, P-O-W, piece of work, white mom, who is just unbelievably woke. She actually cut a video of herself forcing her children to bow down to black women after arguing that black women are the reason Donald Trump won't be president. I'm just going to roll the films before we do anything else.
Black women are the reason that Donald Trump is no longer going to be our president.
All hail black women.
There is so much loose here. There are so many ways with which you can attack this story. Number one is the woman herself, right? She's clearly a smug, liberal, suburbanite woman. She's got 4 boys. God, what kind of an irony is that? Can you imagine being a boy in that family? Can you imagine being simply pawns to show off her wokeness to black women who pay no attention to her, and quite frankly, in her suburban existence, she probably never encounters? Second of all, how about the trance-like, all hail black women? If you're going to do something stupid like that, make it sound somewhat authentic, somewhat grateful. Make it sound like you're really, really thankful that black women have all this going for them, instead of this robotic kind of where the Stepford wife drone voice. And then how about this? How about the fact that black women are at most 6.5%, 7% of the population? In what universe, what mathematical universe does this woman occupy, where if every single African-American woman in the country voted against Donald Trump, that's still not good enough to get him anywhere near defeated? What is your logic there when you're catering and you're kissing up to black butt that way? What's your exit strategy on this? Well, we know what happened. Katie will give you the details. All those African-American women didn't really like it, did they, Katie?
Nope. The woman's name, by the way, is Justine Champion. And this was actually published at the end of this last year. And it was a TikTok video. And as you obviously saw, it's, her 4 sons worshiping. And so she, I don't know, looking for praise, but certainly didn't get it because they said she was making these videos just for clout and not because they genuinely agreed. She said, one commenter said, "I'm a woman of color," and agreed. But it's annoying when people make these videos just for clout and not because they genuinely agreed. So it was like a whole.
I'm an African-American woman of color, and I agree, she said. But this is just for clout. I still want somebody to explain to me how it was that black women won this election. How did that happen?
I don't know. But Champion at least responded that, "I know the type you're talking about, so I'm not upset or anything. But I just wanted to clarify that that's not why I made this video. If you want to go onto my page and see some of my content, you can see some of the things I regularly do. Yeah. The actions that I take to help the communities that are marginalized in the United States." And now, according to the New York Post, Champion has added in her defense, that she's gone viral before for posting videos of women and people of color and the history that's left out of our textbooks.
So this isn't about her. It's not about her clout. It's not about her wokeness. But come to my site to see. All you black women out there who are offended by me, because you know what it is, these little boys, most African-American women who aren't touched in the head with liberalism recognize these little boys are too young to be actually able to worship anything. So when they're you could have them bowing to the spaghetti monster. You could have these, put them in little MAGA hats. You could have them bowing to Trump with every bit as much ease as you have them bowing to this idiot white suburban woman. But the irony here that your response is, I'm not doing this for hits. I'm not doing this for attention. I'm not doing this for white clout. Oh, come to my videos. Come look at all the other ways I've done this. Come look at all the other ways I've exploited my family in the name of woke social justice.
Yes, but of course, she still did eventually take the video down because she says in a new video, she put up a whole new video. I mean, really, the other video already got its hits, so now you got to put out a new video anyway to get generated more hits. She said the last thing. Last, all caps, the last thing that I wanted to do was to put WOC, women of color, in danger. And then she replaced the original video with a new video that is basically a snippet of the original, followed by a black woman speaking straight to the camera, explaining that this kind of language is putting a target on our back. So it's become...
And there you have the over-the-top African-American female reaction by having a WAP do this to WOCs. Let me explain myself. A WAP is a woman of color doing this to a woman of color. When you have a WAP doing this to a WOC, it puts targets on our backs.
Since we're talking about kneeling and bowing down and all that, we know that in Alaska, the children will have to kneel during school. And it's because the overlords in Alaska say, if you're coming into this classroom with COVID out there, you better not be sitting in a nice comfy desk. The Anchorage School District is starting their in-person classes, obviously when the weather cooperates, because it's Alaska and it's wintertime. And so they have their pre-K to 2, their K to 6, and then the self-contained special needs programs. Those kids are coming back into the classroom, and they haven't been there since March. But that means that they had to remove all desks and proper, comfortable seating so kids can learn. Instead, here's what they get. That's right. A chair and a garden kneeling pad. So they'll take the garden kneeling pad and kneel on it and use the desk chair seat as their desktop. And then other kids, they get a nice little square over there and a bucket as a desktop. So that's also nice. And I mean, they're only going to be kneeling like that for 5.5 hours a day. So that's cool. Thanks, Alaska. And instead of lockers, they're going to have to bring a 5-gallon utility bucket, as you kind of saw there. You can put your lunch in there and your jackets and your supplies and your dignity. And then the parents were told that all students will be masked over their nose and their mouth. And again, some of these kids, the kindergartners or pre-K, this is the first experience they have of school. So maybe they think this is normal.
Pre-K from 0 to 2?
It's a pre-K to second grade.
To second grade.
So it could be 4K.
So, yeah, right, these kids. And so I guess, as you pointed out, Katie, that this is Anchorage. Something tells me there's not a lot of ethnic diversity in Anchorage, Alaska, outside of the local Inuit, right? I don't imagine that this is a haven for African Americans or Hispanics. And so Anchorage was probably, I would bet my bottom dollar, one of the whitest cities in America. And this is where those kids belong. They belong on their knees. Give me, I've listened to that idiot Fauci. I've heard him whine. Give me one example of anybody who's ever said anyhow that kneeling is going to somehow improve this. Does the story give us any sense of what the logic is being on your knees rather than sitting in a seat?
Well, you read it. It's basically they're spacing the kids out.
But like you pointed out, why can't that be done in chairs? Why does it have to be done on your knees? What is other than symbolism, which is highly, highly, highly transparent here? What is what do you think you're accomplishing by doing this? How are parents reacting to this? This new moratorium on sitting.
Well, one anonymous parent said we wouldn't allow terrorists to be treated like this. So I don't think they like it much.
Well, that's exactly right. And now you got the Chicago teachers unions. We'll do a story on them later. Who came out the other day and say we would rather teach in the freezing cold outside than go inside and actually deal with COVID. And now a new study came out today. Haven't even had time, Katie, to add it to the new list of stories yet, which says there's not a single shred of evidence that adults catching the virus is any more in the public schools than it would have been in regular life. So there's not a single piece of evidence that a teacher teaching in a modern day public school is going to get COVID at a rate higher than anybody else is going to get it. And yet, with Anchorage, Alaska, which, by the way, is a theoretically red town in a theoretically red state run by Republicans, this is the answer? Seems to me that, like the first story here, this is all about symbology than it is about actually helping. These teachers don't want to come back and teach. If you're going to make them come back and teach, then we're going to put your kids on their knees and worship the teachers. This is going to turn into kind of a church. This is going to be kind of one of those things that we're going to make you do penance. If you're going to come back, force these dedicated teachers to risk their lives, what you're going to do is you're going to make the kids as uncomfortable as possible. You're going to make the kids' experience as miserable as possible. So guess what? Within 2 weeks, the kids are going to be screaming to get out of the schools, which was going to underscore your original position, and maybe you won't have to teach them.
Yeah, so right now they're having just that limited age group come in, and for grades 3 to 6, they're still going to be on Zoom, and select middle and high schools who need support are in person, but the rest of them are not. And so what their plan is for all of fourth quarter, finally the kids will come back in person if they make it that far. But the district had said it may be hard to remember what school in school was like. That's okay. We will transition to a new routine together. We're paving the way for a new approach to learning in person. And the district is prepared, they say, with an individualized school safety and mitigation plan. And it's in line with the CDC guidelines and customized by school principals and staff to ensure the mitigation works for each unique school's buildings and culture. Excellent. Now, the teachers union, meanwhile, the Anchorage Education Association, AEA, they sent highly detailed instructions to all of their members, telling them exactly how to document their discontent with actually having to return to in-person learning, and so that they may file a successful grievance against the school district. So they're already shoring up exactly
why they shouldn't be there at all.
Yeah, what they want to do. And they've already filed the first grievance, because you have to get one rolling before you can get the next. And they demand that the teachers may refuse to carry out orders that they feel threaten health. So if the teacher's health is threatened, they already got it all set up for you.
Does this give teachers the authority then, I would imagine? Because when did teaching become such a selfish thing, where your primary, your only concern is you? We talked about many times on this show as immediately prior to the COVID outbreak about a year ago, you had teachers marching out of classrooms in the name of communism, right? Red for ed, in the name of communism. We're going to march out of classroom. We're going to abandon your kids in the middle of a semester when nothing else could be done with them until you give us a big fat raise, which in every instance, by the way, they got, and no consequences. Now you've got a situation where these teachers, if they feel their health is threatened, they can not do it. They can be insubordinate. They're free to do whatever they want. I mean, if the teacher walks into class the first day and decides, oh, no, I can smell COVID in the air. I can smell COVID. And walks right out, that's perfectly acceptable. So I assume this gives the teacher the ability to walk out if the health of the children is compromised too? So if I were a teacher and walked into a classroom where these kids were on their knees for 45 minutes or an hour or 3 hours a day, to me, that's a much graver health risk to those kids than anything I'm facing by a cough or a sniffle. But again, do you think the teachers will use it for this? Do you think the teachers are going to walk into class right away and say, hey, this is an unfair to the kids kind of a setup? We either go back to the other way or it's no way.
Well, in that first grievance, the letter actually points out specifically the dangerous situation that will occur when the students take off their masks to eat and drink in the classroom. So that's to the degree of the danger, and maybe that's why those desks are gone, because it creates at least a little something.
Didn't see it 2 or 3 times over the inauguration week last week that Joe Biden was caught after immediately signing a mandatory mask mandate. I guess that's kind of a little overkill there, but a mandatory mask law, which isn't really legal, enforcing masks anywhere on federal property. We find him without his mask. And what did CNN tell us? What did Joe Biden's own press secretary say about his masklessness?
He's celebrating.
He's celebrating. My goodness. He's celebrating. We have bigger fish to fry than your microbes and your viruses.
And now more cases of racism actually come out, because if you're white, you now don't get an internship, at least according to a University of Dallas female student who claims that she didn't get an internship simply because she is Casper, the apparently unfriendly ghost. And it's an anonymous student who told the college fix, because she doesn't, fear of retribution, not getting anything, a job maybe even. She says, it's not like I was underqualified or anything. I met everything else. I had the right major. I had the right GPA. I was the right year in college, but I was white, so they wouldn't help me. And the terminology, so they wouldn't help me, makes me think of actual racism back in the day. Now, this internship was offered by Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. It's a professional development organization with ties to major financial corporations such as Citibank, IBM, Goldman Sachs, all the players. And it was advertised as the SEO Career 2021 Paid Summer Internship. The description was for a financial position. Okay, so according to this female student, she met all the criteria, GPA, major, all that. Well, here's her emailed rejection. It said, "Thank you for your interest in SEO Career. Unfortunately, you are not eligible for the program. SEO Career targets Black, Hispanic, and Native American undergraduates who are underrepresented in the careers they seek." The rejection does, though, it leaves on an optimistic, positive note. It says, maybe you should make a LinkedIn account or attend a few career fairs. Then maybe you'll get that
or
lovely
pretend
job.
You're not white. The kick in all of this is the email. Why they feel the need? Why it's just so stupid. But this is all about virtue signaling, so they have to tell you why. If they were clever, these banks, they would have sent an email just saying, "Hey, thank you. We had many qualified applicants. We were sorry we couldn't choose you." They should have said that. But then if they said that, guess what they would get? No street cred for being all about blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans. So they literally had to say to her, you see the kind of position that this the new racism of the left puts us in, the new segregation of the left puts us in, the new intolerance of leftist bigots puts us in, that the purpose of this, if you're white or if you're a traditional company or any kind of corporation in this country now, you have to not just betray civil rights laws. You have to hire only certain people, regardless of the credentials. But you have to boast about it. It's not enough now to quietly hire people who don't belong or shouldn't be there based on their qualifications, overlook people who are much more experienced and qualified. That's not enough. You have to look the person in the eye who you just passed over and said, "You're not white enough, you're not black enough. Go ahead and take out a LinkedIn page," and that should do it for you.
Are you on LinkedIn?
I am not on LinkedIn.
Do you know what LinkedIn is?
It's a stupid online place where everybody networks, right? Maybe they ought to have white LinkedIn, which means, how about this? Let's just do an all-white LinkedIn and call it unplugged because no one's going to read it. And LinkedIn can be just about minorities. Minority LinkedIn versus LinkedIn Unplugged that nobody watches. How about that? That would be the supreme form of justice. Maybe, said this before, maybe we should stop allowing any white people into schools for a 10-year period. Hire no white people for any job for a 10-year period. Allow no promotions for white people who are already employed for a 10-year period. Provide no social benefits for white people for 10 years. Whatever the taxes are for white people, triple them for 10 years and have each white person responsible for paying for the taxes of 2 non-white people. This is what you're aiming for, so do it.
That would almost sound biblical, though.
Well, that would be a biblical black Moses
that would be, yeah.
coming to the white Pharaoh,
or
right?
You 7 years of famine.
You will not let my people go. Oh, you mean they don't want to go? They want to stay and collect all those benefits? You will not provide the benefits you will not let my people stay in the condition we want them to be accepted in, which is give them everything.
There you go. That sounds just about right. Well, SEO
Pharaoh
decided to respond to the College Fix because College Fix reached out to them and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they said they do not comment on any individual application decision. And our mission is to create a more equitable society where people from all racial backgrounds are represented at every level of American society. While we do not host internships or use race in our hiring decisions, we provide supplemental education and training to support the advancement of underserved and underrepresented individuals with a special focus on those who will benefit most from SEO's services and intervention.
So the only people we discriminate against, and the only place we discriminate is when we tell them to their faces why we're not accepting them. They didn't deny their email, right? You're not black, Hispanic, or Native American, so we can't help you. So you do discriminate. You are not about you are not about the promotion of people of all races. Just say it. You went and got your bona fides here, right? You got your bona fides. You looked a little white girl in the face and said, "You're not the person for this." So take credit for it. You already got that. Why not make your virtue signal larger? As professional bankers, we have decided that white people need not apply. We're doing this to benefit all races.
time for some real education. We've talked about C.S. Lewis many a time. Well, he's written something called the Space Trilogy, and the third book in that trilogy is called That Hideous Strength. Now, the story follows the adventures of Dr. Elwyn Ransom, who traveled to Mars in book 1, called Out of the Silent Planet, and then in book 2, called Paralandra, he went to Venus. However, unlike those first two, in That Hideous Strength, which was written in 1945, Elwyn actually stays on planet Earth.
Yeah, and last week's Dystopia Week, last week we did all quotes from dystopian novels because the ushering in of the Joe Biden, Biden's been president for 3 days. Do you see all the dystopian things he's done already, right? The canceling, just letter to the ICE people, just free everybody he got in prison, regardless of who they may have raped or just let them all go. The dystopian way that we're engaging in the new virus. The reason we're doing elect Joe Biden is because he's going to fix the COVID problem. And what is the response yesterday? There's nothing we can do about it. The dystopian world we have of power. So I've decided to extend Dystopia Week one more week, at least, because it was so popular with the viewers, lots of great comments. And all week this week, each of our instant classics is going to deal with quotes from That Hideous Strength, which is the third book of C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. And in that book, it's the only one of those science fiction books that's set on the planet Earth. It's when the cosmos pushes back against radical dystopian socialists. A really great story. Here's a great quote from that book. This is from the woman, her name is Fairy Hardcastle. She's in charge of rehabilitation and intellectual reprogramming of people. Her job it is to make good little citizens of the state in a very communist way. And here's what she says is the way to go about doing this. Quote, "Isn't it absolutely essential to keep a fierce left and a fierce right, both on their toes and each terrified of the other? Doesn't it benefit as globalists, those who want to take away your freedoms, to make sure that there's a radical left and a radical right and have them constantly fighting? Sound familiar? Isn't it absolutely essential to keep a fierce left and a fierce right, both on their toes and each terrified of the other? That's how we get things done. Any opposition to the nice, which is the name of their organization, it's an anagram. Any opposition to the nice is represented as a left racket in the right-wing papers and a right racket in the left-wing papers. If this is done properly, you get each side outbidding the other in support of us to refute the enemy's slanders. Of course, we're non-political. The real power always is." This was 1945 this book was written, and Lewis has summed up beautifully how the globalist authoritarians that control everything from the social media tech giants to the big bankers, we want the left and right at each other's throat. Everything that's wrong in the world is the right's fault, says the left news, and vice versa. While they're fighting each other, we're taking control of everything, as we saw in this last election cycle, 1945. I can't urge you enough to read the book. You don't even have to read the first two books to enjoy the third book, which stands alone. You'll like it better if you read all three. But just read That Hideous Strength if you do one thing this year, and you will see a blueprint for the loss of freedom in the world, as we see here.
Now we want to take a moment to show some love to the various Patriot Club members who support us. And today we're giving a shout out to Brenda from Cottonwood, Arizona, where it's probably nice and warm, and I'm freezing up here in Wisconsin. Thank you for supporting us. And if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club. And we're going to send you our signature tumbler. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day, the WWJD phrase, "What would Jesus do?" And the bracelet craze, if you remember that, began in the 1990s, but the wording actually traced back to 1897 in a novel by Charles M. Sheldon, who is a Topeka, Kansas minister and an evangelical Christian writer.
Okay, and that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.